It seems that Russia is running out of willing bodies, no matter how much they pay their new recruits. Is this starting to show up on the battlefield? And just what does it mean for Russia's manpower advantage? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about it. Okay, so this is interesting, but it's a story from Meduza, one of the only investigative independent news outlets that continues to operate in Russia. And it's reporting that as of at least December, that Russia, despite doubling its sign-on bonus payment, the Russian army's recruitment rate is falling. And some estimates have losses outpacing new enlistments, which is a huge problem for the Russian military, right? Now, it's hard to tease out, right, exactly what's going on here, but Russia drops a lot of reports, and sometimes key information ends up not even buried in the reports, but can be teased out of it. And in the case of Meduza, there's documents about government expenditures on contract signing bonus, which you can then use to estimate the number of new volunteers, right? Because if you know the total amount spent on a signing bonus, on all signing bonuses, and you know the current amount per soldier of signing bonuses, well, it's pretty easy to get at your monthly or yearly or quarterly, in this case, recruitment rate. And so Meduza looked at the government's budget report in July to September of 2024, compared the results to quarterly figures from the past years. And they conclude that the current rate of Russia's contract recruitment may be lower than its pace of losses in Ukraine, right? Now, according to their reports, let's see if we can find it here. This is their data analysis based on quarters. So contract recruits, right, fell from 93,000 in the second quarter, right? So remember, the estimates currently are a quarter, 3 months of the year, and Russia is generating, the most Western estimates place it at around between 25 and 30,000. We'll use the high end, and we'll say 30,000. So we're going to see 90,000 is kind of the baseline, and that's about what they need to offset their losses. So, and you can see they effectively did so in fact, in fourth quarter 2023, right, when the Ukrainian forces pushed into Kursk, there was a big surge in enlistments as 200,000 plus signed on to defend Russian territory. And then there was 73,000 enlistments in the first quarter of 2024, so below replacement. But that's when we started to see reports of Russia doubling bonuses, and they were able to meet their target of about 90,000, right? Enough to offset losses. But now, third quarter 2024, you're seeing the losses look very much, or you're looking at the rate continue to decline, right? If there is, for example, a very late reporting of all signing bonuses, maybe they could get up to 83K, but it seems more likely that Russia's bringing in just 50,000 soldiers in the third quarter of 2024. And this itself is pretty troubling because, again, if you're looking at, join me in doing simple math that I should be able to do in my head, they average 16,000 soldiers a month. That is, given the fact that Russia loses at least 1,000 a day, while many reports indicate that number is closer to 1,600. This represents just 10 days of fighting out of the month, meaning that for 20 days, Russia's going to be running at a loss. So you can see that if this trend continues, which again, there's a point at which the Russian public is going to run out of people willing to die at any price. Right. And there's also a point where the Russian budget may not be able to sustain it. Right. We're starting to see the ruble struggle a bit. Now it's stabilized since it had that unusual spike recently. But before we talk about that and we talk about sort of Russia's strategic calculus in this and why there's even some signs of weakness emerging already, I want to mention that from my trip in Ukraine, I met a lot of different soldiers, and a lot of them agreed to share with me some of their drone and combat footage that has now been added to the mix on combatvetnews.com. So if you've been thinking about signing up for it, now is definitely the time. It's also the best way to support me and the channel, keeping me independent. You guys know that, not a lot of sponsors want to back a channel that makes war content, but more importantly, a lot of influencers in the military space, especially covering this conflict, they can get offered pretty lucrative deals that can be pretty coercive. And I have as well. Governments have reached out, or government-backed media outlets, and pretty forcefully asked for collaborations. But luckily, I tell them to fuck off because I don't need their money, because I have you guys in my corner, right? So if you want to help me out and, of course, get access to that exclusive footage, you want to join over on combatvetnews.com. Links in the description. Okay, so here's what I think is interesting. Here's a sign that I think the Russian recruitment situation may be quite a bit worse than they're letting on, right? Ukrainian defense forces are also facing a manpower crisis, to be clear. But they have been focused on the defense, where Russia has actually doubled down on its offensive efforts. So what we're seeing is something that I haven't seen in a long time, which is Ukrainian forces actually retaking turf. You can see they regained control over Novy Komyar. This is somewhere that Russian forces kind of surged into and have recently been pushed out of, right? And this is unusual in its own right here. Again, simply because for a lot of time, for months, the Ukrainian forces' policy has been to force the Russians to advance, fight on the back foot, so to speak. You also saw just 2 days ago is in Novomailesk, right? This is, of course, a Russian effort to cross the Dnipro, or the Oskil River in the north, and you could see that the Ukrainian forces had the stamina to be like, no, get out of here. Now, obviously, it's worth noting that preserving the Oskil, right, and a river crossing is a comparatively easy operation to disrupt, because again, it involves narrow supply lines. If you can choke those narrow supply lines, you can exterminate the forces on the far side of the river fairly easily. But this is clearly a real priority for Ukrainian forces, right? Preserving this portion of the Oskil, at least down to this point here. And it's not an accident, right? It involves, again, a pretty central part of this Ukrainian strategy in preserving their ability to keep the fight going and to use terrain to their advantage. But the takeaway for this is that while we're still seeing a lot of Russian advances and we're seeing Russians eat a lot of losses, we're seeing parts in localized, sort of individualized ways. We're seeing Ukrainian forces able to push them back. And again, Ukrainian forces are not out here having a spectacular time with recruiting. They have their own manpower issues. But the fact is that even subject to these intense manpower issues, they still feel like in places, in lower priority places, the Russian military is starting to look so anemic that even the Ukrainians can push them out. That is a sign that Russia's recruitment, that all may not be well in the Russian recruitment environment. Anyway, guys, that's all I had. Huge thank you to Bill Collier, Robert Colburn, Gaius Marning, Gina Questa, Chris Gorsuch, Francis L90, and Petra Tororu, as well as all of our lieutenant tier members. I could not do this without you guys, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers. Oh, and hit that subscribe button. Thanks.